in most cases, a part of a marginalized group who is siding with the oppressor is doing so because they don't realize how oppressed they truly are and how much that group is hurting them. There's a lot of internalized isms going on there, a lot of internalized transphobia in this case, for example, and not realizing that that's what it is, that, hey, this is gonna hurt you. And no matter how much you kiss that group's ass, no matter how much you try to be one of them and just like the conservatives and like, look at me, I'm one of you, the time will come that they take all of us out, and they're not going to care that you support them. They're not going to care that you agreed. You won't be one of the good ones. You are still a trans person, and they will still do away with your rights too. Hello there. Ignore the fact that I need to tidy my office just a little bit. It could be worse, but it could be better, and I am very aware of that. Especially since the box that we keep our records in is literally collapsing on itself. We need to take all the records out, rearrange them, put them back in there. It's going to be a whole thing one of these days. But yeah, I like to film in here because the lighting is nice. Today we're going to be discussing a very tricky subject. It's a very controversial subject in the fact that even people within certain marginalized communities have not come to a solid conclusion as to what it means to be a great ally, or even a good ally for that matter. The fact of the matter is, everyone in the world should be an ally to some group or another, because at the end of the day, it is literally impossible for anyone to be a part of every single marginalized community in the world. And that means everyone has a capacity to be an ally to somebody else. You can be an ally for people who face religious discrimination, people who are, Hindu or Muslim or Jewish, and that as soon as anyone finds out what religion they are, they're going to automatically be treated extremely poorly as a result because of ignorance, because people simply do not understand what that religion entails. They don't understand the religion's symbolism or anything like that, and they frankly don't endeavor to. I know everyone says things like Google is free, you can do your own work if you want to learn more about someone, but you also have to understand that Google can be just as detrimental toward marginalized groups as it can be helpful. So say that you do want to become an ally to the Jewish community. You're noticing the rise in anti-Semitism, you are not okay with it, but you're like, what can I do as a non-Jewish person to help Jewish people through this? So you go to Google and you start looking. Unfortunately, there will be quite a few websites out there and social media accounts out there that seem harmless, that seem like they're just offering up information that is like, oh, here's the pros and cons, the positives and negatives of the Jewish community. And you're like, oh, that's fair. It's this nice centrist idea on the Jewish community. I can learn from this, but what you may not understand going into a website or a platform like that is some of them are legitimate and some of them are going to be filled with dog whistles. Some of them are going to be posed as a nice conversation, an open conversation, when in fact they're trying to draw you into the side that is like, look at how bad they are, though. Yes, there's good aspects of them, but look at all the bad things that they do. And eventually you can fall down an alt-right pipeline and decide that Jewish people are the cause of all the world's problems. Same goes for many other communities. You can be an ally to the disabled community and start understanding that the world itself, even modern cities, are not made for disabled people. And as a result, a lot of disabled people are trapped just being in their house all day long, unhappy, and the rare times they try to go out and they say, hey, this could be more accessible, everyone wants to fight with us. You can be an ally to the LGBTQIA community and understand that there is a lot of harmful legislature trying to be pushed right now that would make us considered less than human, not just in the United States, but in several other countries as well. And you can be an ally toward people of a different race than you, because again, race, ethnicity, anything like that, it's impossible for you to be literally everything. And even if you want to claim that, like for example, I knew a girl in high school. She was very much white. This was in like 2005, 2006, so DNA kits weren't really something a lot of people understood or knew about, and you certainly weren't just buying them and taking them home yet. So she had gone on Ancestry.com just out of curiosity and been like, oh, I discovered these people in my family, and she decided that even though she was white, she was now like a quarter or something Japanese and like something else African, because these people had been in her family before, and it was unintentionally harmful to those communities because she had not had to experience any of the negative side of being an African person or an Asian person or a Native American person in the United States. She just felt like she could claim a cool sounding label in her opinion. And so that conversation had to be opened with those groups. And this is something that happens a lot. If you're on TikTok, there's a phenomenon called pretendians, where a lot of people who are white or who presume they were white for most of their life and are only a smidgen Native are claiming Native heritage. They're starting to get these tattoos that are specific to particular tribes. They're starting to try to claim any of the few tiny scraps of positivity that have been given to Native communities. And if communities are getting rightfully pissed off about this and being like, listen, you didn't have to go through any of the bad stuff, so you don't get to just claim this and wear it like a fancy hat. If you really want to embrace your Native culture, you're going to have to do a lot of work in order to get there. You're going to have to learn from a lot of people in that community. So all that aside, like I said, anyone can and should be an ally to some group that you are not currently a part of. But there is something that does come up for allies, all allies, no matter what group you are advocating for. And it's something that gets talked about a little bit when there's something particularly bad going down in the media, something that is downright traumatic for a specific group and is also traumatic for people who have to see it happen. But outside that, you don't really hear about it. And it's the fact that being an ally is hard. No matter what group you are advocating for, it is difficult to be an ally. And there's a few things that tend to come up when it comes to being a good ally that can make things a little bit more difficult. And I'm hoping that in this video today, I can simplify them a little more. But before we get into it, I want to make sure you understand this is a matter of opinion, unfortunately. Like, by now, if you're an ally of any group, you should know the general ins and outs of it, like what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, why that group is suffering, stuff like that. But some aspects of being a good ally do come down to each person's interpretation. So you do have to keep that in mind moving forward. The first thing that is difficult when it comes to allyship is the fact that when you first decide you're going to be an ally to a particular group that is suffering right now, you will be faced with a reality you were not made aware of before. You're going to be faced with aspects of what that group has to go through on a daily basis that you never thought possible or true, and it will rock your world. A good example is stuff like BLM right now. All of us in grade school were taught, Black people were not historically treated well in the United States of America. Slavery was fucking horrible. The civil rights movement shouldn't have even had to be a thing. People should have been able to just live however they wanted to, go to the same school as white people, drink out of the same fountain. Jim Crow laws were atrocious and disgusting and shouldn't have existed. We know that surface level stuff. But then you get into, okay, I'm starting to see like police brutality or something. I want to be an ally to the Black community. How do I do that? And you start looking deeper. You start listening to Black voices online and talking to them about their experience. You start looking into things you didn't realize because they'd been hidden from you. Things like Rosewood. That wasn't in the history books. They did their best to cover up the fact that that was not the only town that went through that, but that every time a black community, a black city started to thrive, absolutely thrive, without any aid of white people. And they started to either become on equal level with the rich white elite, or they were surpassing them. They got fucking bombed. The cities were literally bombed. They were flattened to the ground. They were destroyed, demolished, whatever you want to call it. And the people who lived there had all of their wealth taken from them because the rich white elite at the time did not want to see black people proving that they could be either superior or on equal level to white people. Because in their mind, if they reach our level, we are going to lose some degree of power, and we don't want that. Power is the only thing that we care about. It is the one true absolute. We need to maintain our power. Therefore, we need to knock them down a peg. And here's the trouble with that, apart from the fact that you're killing a bunch of innocent people for doing what you claim is the thing you're supposed to do to achieve the American dream. They did literally everything by the book. They did everything right, and they were punished for it. But the other issue is it creates a generational wealth disparity. Think of it this way. If you're a white person and your grandfather is retired right now, he used to own his own small business, and he has, say, $100,000 in his bank account right this second, not including his Social Security check payments that he gets since he's retired. Your father currently works at the business your grandfather created, and is basically, he's taken that place, because that happens a lot with small businesses or even large corporations. There's, somebody started the business and then their children take it over and their children take it over, and through the generations, they all keep that business in the family more or less. What would have happened to your family if that was a majority of your family's wealth? And remember, wealth, the word wealth doesn't mean you're rich in this scenario. It just means it's where your money is coming from. I don't want anyone getting confused. When I say wealth, I just mean it's where your family's money is stemming from. So say that all of your family has inherited this business over the years, and as soon as your dad retires, it's going to be your business. You're going to get to run it. You're going to get to reap the benefits of all those generations of hard work. It's a nice thing. You'll be able to support your family and have a relatively comfortable life. And some dude just comes in one day who is absolutely out of his mind. He lays down a bomb in the building and destroys your family business. Yeah, you might have insurance. You'll have business insurance. It'll cover some stuff, but that's going to take some time. Insurance doesn't work instantaneously. You don't just call in and say, hey, dumbass here blew up my business. Can you give me like $1 million? It doesn't work like that. They are going to give you what you need as slowly as possible, and they are going to do their best to give you the bare minimum that you need in order to survive now, because they don't want to lose any money. They're supposed to be there as a safety net, but they're very much not. And I know this even by personal experience with people in my own life who have had to deal with insurance and the nonsense that comes with it. They'll always do whatever they can to give you as little money as possible, as slowly as possible. So you're told you're going to have to wait, let's say 6 months for anything to go through with insurance. And you're like, crap, well, we've got our savings, but it isn't going to be enough to carry us for 6 months. It'll carry us for maybe 3 or 4 months. And beyond that, what are we going to do? So one of you then has to get a typical 9-to-5 job, which typically isn't gonna pay you enough to have a very bulky savings account. You're gonna get by, you're gonna pay your bills, but you're gonna be living paycheck to paycheck. And this makes it next to impossible to ever bring that business back. If you've ever seen in the newspaper things like small business catches fire, how often do you see that business going back into business again in the future? It's actually very rare when you really look at it. And usually the rare times it does happen, it was fully because of crowdfunding. It's that the community was well enough off that they were able to donate money to bring that business back. It doesn't usually happen, unfortunately. So now you don't get to inherit that business anymore. You have less wealth than you had expected to have for your family, and that creates some problems down the line. Now, none of your children are going to have that wealth either. This is what happened to those Black communities on a much larger scale. And the fact that they had to live in an area that had been absolutely flattened by bombings and stuff, so their homes were unsafe. And you get these places, everyone's like, oh, it's the ghetto, it's so disgusting, there's bad people there. And it's like, well, one, they're not bad people. They're people that we put in a bad situation, and they're doing the best they can with what little they have. And two, it's not disgusting. It's just a place someone lives because they have no other choice. What's disgusting is how it got like that. And yes, finding out some atrocities like this, or things that happen at like residential schools for Native Americans, or the many asylums that disabled people were put in and abused literally every day and starved to death just because they were disabled. The fact that the LGBTQIA community started to slowly become more normalized and treated better, and is now backsliding very swiftly and being treated like less than human. And laws are getting put into place to encourage us to die, essentially. They're doing everything they can to try to kill us off. All of this is terrible, and learning the aspects of it that you didn't know before is hard, and it's okay to be upset about it. It's okay to go, oh my God, I can't watch any more videos on this today. It is too fucking hard. It's too painful to see what has happened to these groups. I hate this. But what you need to understand when you get to that point is use that rage, use that pain, use that disgust to help that community. Don't just close the laptop and say, it's too hard, I can't do this, I think that what's happening to these communities is bad, but nope, because you're not a good ally now. Use it to help. And always remember, you have the benefit of being able to just close the laptop and say, seeing the news is too hard, I'm not going to watch the news for a few months now because I don't like seeing the sad stuff. Those groups don't get to do that. They don't have the luxury of closing the laptop. They still have to live through those atrocities day after day. Remember your privilege when you feel that way. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to say, I need a little brain break for a minute today. But remember that the group you're advocating for doesn't get to do that, and that you do need to buckle down and get right back to it as soon as possible, and understand that they do have it worse. Your feelings are never as valuable as someone else's life. The other aspect of allyship that I see become very difficult for people over time is the fact that the further into allyship you get, the more you start seeing just those groups that you're advocating for on your social media or online, wherever you are searching and stuff for information on it and how to be a good ally. And there will be people within that group who fundamentally disagree with one another, and that can get very confusing from an ally's headspace. A great example of this right now is the Harry Potter game that just came out. They anticipated that it's going to be one of the biggest game launches, possibly even in the whole year already, even though we're this early in the year, just because of how massive the franchise is and the fan base for it. And a lot of allies are really confused and unsure of what to do right now, because you have a vocal majority of people who fall under the trans umbrella saying, please don't buy this game, because by purchasing the game, you are directly supporting someone who is using their power and wealth to hurt the trans community, and that isn't okay. Yes, it's understood that Rowling was paid before the game was even in development. We understand that. We understand that she may not directly benefit financially from you buying a particular copy, but she does get royalties, so you're still helping her out with that. And you're handing her more power by purchasing anything from any of her series, because she sees that she remains very relevant and very famous online and in the media as a whole, and she does use that to hurt people. She shouldn't, but she does. She uses her fame and her wealth and power to encourage people to pass transphobic laws that are actually harming people and in some cases killing them. And that isn't okay. From what I've heard from some people in the UK, she is popular enough in her turf mentality there that people have actually brought her opinions, because of how famous she is, to Parliament and used her arguments in Parliament to try to prove that trans people shouldn't be given basic human rights. That is how rich and how powerful she is, and how important she is, and how detrimental she is to the transgender community. So a lot of people were saying, you're not necessarily a bad person if you buy anything Harry Potter related, or if you buy this game or play it. You're not a bad person, but you are a bad ally, because we explained to you in detail why buying it is directly harming the trans community and directly benefiting someone who is openly transphobic and trying to hurt the trans community, and you did it anyway, and it shouldn't be difficult. No one is saying that you don't get to buy groceries this week, or you're, a bad trans ally. No one is saying you're not allowed to pay your electric bill or turn your heat on in the dead of winter, or you're a bad trans ally. No one is saying anything that will cause harm to you. They're just saying, hey, during an economic crisis right now where people barely have enough money to get by and everyone's living paycheck to paycheck, don't use what little savings you have on a game, a form of entertainment that you don't need, that is a want, not a need or a necessity. Don't spend your money on this because it's going to hurt people. And people are valuing their feelings above trans lives. And the issue with the allyship comes from the fact that there are a few trans people online right now saying, stop saying that shit. People can like whatever they want. You're speaking for all of us, and that's not the way that all of us feel. Let people like what they like. It's not a big deal. And the problem with that is that in most cases, a part of a marginalized group who is siding with the oppressor is doing so because they don't realize how oppressed they truly are and how much that group is hurting them. There's a lot of internalized isms going on there, a lot of internalized transphobia in this case, for example, and not realizing that that's what it is, that, hey, this is gonna hurt you. And no matter how much you kiss that group's ass, no matter how much you try to be one of them and just like the conservatives and look at me, I'm one of you, the time will come that they take all of us out, and they're not going to care that you support them. They're not going to care that you agreed. You won't be one of the good ones. You are still a trans person, and they will still do away with your rights too. And when all else fails, when it comes to disagreement within a marginalized group and you saying, which side do I listen to? Err on the side of caution. If you see several people from a marginalized group saying this thing is hurting us, assume it's bad. It's better to assume it's bad, especially again if it's a non-essential thing. It's just like a form of entertainment or something that's not going to hurt you if you deny yourself that thing. Err on the side of caution and just avoid it. Avoid it entirely. It's better for you. It's better for that group overall. It's better to just understand that, well, if it's hurting even a handful of people, it's hurting someone. And just as a decent human being, you shouldn't want to deliberately hurt somebody else. So as I say, just don't support that thing that you know happens to be hurting any part of a group, but especially if it seems like it's disproportionate and more people in that group are saying this is a bad thing than are saying this is a good thing or a neutral thing. There is no neutrality when it comes to activism. You don't get to be centrist with this, because if you're centrist, you are an active part of the problem. Centrist, when it comes to marginalized groups, is the same as if you go out and you're like, oh, I need to go to the bank today or something, and you're walking down the sidewalk and you see two people just start pummeling the shit out of someone, and they're screaming out for help. Please help me, please help me. I don't know who these men are. Help me. They're going to kill me. You see them bleeding on the ground and you go, I don't want to get involved. You leave, and you find out later on that those men ended up murdering that other man. You were an active part of his murder because you did nothing. You didn't necessarily have to jump right in with your bare hands and wail back, but you should have done something like call for help. Try to pull the man away. try to create a distraction or a diversion or something, like yelling, "The cops are coming," or something. There were 1,000,001 ways you could have helped, and you chose not to, which means you are part of the problem because you stayed silent. You can't be centrist. I understand being an ally is hard. It's hard for everyone who is an ally of any marginalized group. But once more, for the millionth time in this video, your feelings are not as valuable as someone else's life. It is 1,000,000 times harder for the marginalized group than it is for you, just because it's hard and it hurts your feelings a bit. Do your best to listen to each group and be a good ally. And it's okay, you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to make mistakes, and sometimes verbiage is going to change in that group, and you'll have to get used to, oh, I'm not going to be using that word anymore. I'll be using this word instead. That stuff's going to happen, and you're going to slip up. What matters overall is that you're still endeavoring to change and be beneficial to that group, even when you do make a mistake. You're just like, oops, I'm sorry. I recognize I made a mistake. This is how I will change that in the future so I don't make that mistake again. Moving on, you don't make the mistake again. It is literally that simple. But that's all I have to say today. Hopefully this reached the right people and helped the right people. No marginalized community is a monolith. We do all have our own problems, and we do all have our own solutions to those problems. And there will be disagreements sometimes, but just, take the advice that I offered here. And that's all I really have to say for today. So, see ya.